a regional leader. Now, over the last 2 years, Malaysia has seen a remarkable increase in data center investments. Despite the competitive regional landscape, Malaysia has managed to capture the attention of global data center players due to a number of factors. Number one, infrastructure readiness, energy capacity, ease of doing business in Malaysia, and also government facilitation. In this next session, our panelists will discuss how Malaysia can leverage on this advantage and, most importantly, stay on top. So if you have any questions for our panelists for this session here, do check into Slido now using the QR code. We're going to pop up on the screen again and post up those questions for our panelists to answer later on during the Q&A. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce our moderator for this session, Justin Hayes, Head of Malaysia and Philippines Market for W Media. Hello, Justin. Yes, please, go ahead. I'm just going to quickly introduce Justin. Now, W Media, which is where Justin works, is a multifaceted data center content distributor. As head of the Malaysia and Philippine markets, Justin uses his knowledge of both markets, as well as developments within the industry, to connect IT professionals with vendors in the data center, cloud, and cybersecurity sectors, most notably by organizing the largest cloud and data center conventions in both Malaysia and the Philippines. So Justin, over to you.
Yes, welcome everyone to the panel. We have a number of really interesting topics to talk about today and a number of fantastic speakers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead straight away and jump into it and invite onto the stage my fellow panelists so we can get started. So please welcome to the stage Tan Ziming from MDEC. John Eves, of course, from Edge Centres. Oh, right, okay, we've got pictures up there. Adila Junid from Microsoft. And Mr. Han Yo from YTL. Okay, and I think we were all matching to our pictures now. Welcome everyone to the panel. Is everyone's microphone working, first of all, just to check?
I think so.
Hello.
Yes. Good.
Yep.
In that case, I will hop on to the first question of the panel. We've written down a few of them and we'd like to go through them and see what everyone's thoughts are. So the first one is, in the shifting regional landscape, what makes the data center industry in Malaysia appealing for investment? And what can we do within this industry to increase this appeal to become a regional lead potential? So Zuming, I'd like to start with you. Could you talk from the government facilitation point of view?
All right. Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Zuming. So I'm from the Technology Verticals business unit under the Investment Facilitation Department in MDEC. So my team is basically the team that specializes in the data center industry. We've been facilitating data center investments since 10 to 12 years ago. So we basically have a better understanding of the data center industry than pretty much any other agency in Malaysia. So when we do understand data centers, is not just about data centers as a business, but what are the enablers for data centers as well. So for example, for data center to operate, you need at very minimum two things: power and connectivity. So these are two things that can be challenging depending where you are. So MDEC's role in this area is to facilitate your access to energy as well as connectivity, plus any other thing that requires our help. So for example, you have problems acquiring land for your data center, if you have problems getting permitting for the deployment of fiber, any problem, feel free to come talk to us. That's what we do.
And speaking of, because you mentioned power, obviously, from an energy point of view, I'd like to ask Han his thoughts on how we can make Malaysia more appealing in that sense.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe it helps for us to all have an introduction first before we kind of dive into, so that we can give some context of what we're doing. So I'm Executive Director of YTL Power. We are one of Malaysia's largest conglomerates and infrastructure groups. So, we started off as an independent power producer. So the background from us is kind of in the energy space. But now we're building, what is the region's largest data center park. So we've acquired 2,000 acres of land in Johor, and we're building 500 megawatts of power, renewable energy, solar power, to power 500 megawatts of data center capacity. And this is just 26 kilometers from Singapore. So in terms of what we're doing and why we see Malaysia as being very interesting for investors is the fact that, we're in Singapore and we produce 26% of their electricity. So we have 3,000 megawatts, 3,100 megawatts there. And all our customers come to us and they ask us for renewable energy. And this has been happening for the last 4-5 years. And Singapore is constrained in that regard, but Malaysia is not. So the first thing that Malaysia has is the fact that Malaysia has an abundance of land, resources, and renewable energy. And on top of that, I think we've got great infrastructure. So, we've got great grid, we've got great roads, and I think Malaysia is the natural destination for a lot of these hyperscalers who are looking to venture out and spill out of Singapore.
Thank you very much, Han. And Adila, if you'd like to introduce yourself and then obviously give a little bit of insight from a data governance and policy point of view.
Thank you, Justin, and thanks very much. So I'm Adila, and I'm the Director for Legal and Government Affairs for Microsoft in Malaysia. And yeah, I agree. I mean, Microsoft made a decision to invest in its first data center region in Malaysia with its Bersama Malaysia commitment, recognizing the potential of Malaysia. And I think Malaysia has taken a great step by articulating that aspiration, right? It wants to be the regional leader in the digital economy, and it's got these targets on how much the digital economy should contribute, wanting to be a center for innovation, to cultivate and incubate startups. So having that vision in the first place is a great thing. And we do also have key building blocks in place. We have a data protection law, and as with any law and policy, this can be improved, and I think we recognize that. And so I understand that revisions to raise the level of policy and regulatory protection for making Malaysia an attractive place from the perspective of the digital economy. That's underway. And we also recognize, so Microsoft recognized that Malaysia also has a great talent pool. So one of the things that we are doing, in addition to doing the data center investment, is investing in the talent. We've made a commitment to skill 1 million Malaysians over the next 3 years, and we've actually achieved over 60% of that now. So that's another great driver of the potential ability for Malaysia to be that regional leader in the digital economy. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And John, obviously as the, the Australian in the room, we wanted to know your thoughts on, from an investment point of view, why Malaysia in that sense to start?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm John Eaves. I'm the CEO and founder of Edge Centres. We started off as an Australian business, and our first expansion outside of Australia was into Malaysia. My investment was slightly different, that my primary investor was a Malaysian family. So I was brought here, albeit with capability, which is obviously one of the key aspects. And I'd like to reiterate what you said around staffing, that the level of staff we get in Malaysia for technical is equal to, and if not greater than, the surrounding ASEAN countries. So the capability here, which is why we chose Malaysia for our network operations center and security operations center, will be based for the whole of ASEAN outside of KL in Shah Alam, where our first Edge data center was completed.
Well, thank you very much, John. And then now I've got some individual questions that I'm sort of going to target at each of the panelists. I'll start with Ziming. With companies adopting digitalization, the introduction of 5G and shifts in focus across the region from Singapore to other leading countries. What challenges does Malaysia face in meeting the rising demand for data centers?
That's a very good question. So the biggest challenge is basically it's a spike. It's something that basically started in 2021. For 10 years, we've been working on all the challenges. We basically understood that there were a lot of challenges that we needed to fix. So we spent the last 10 years taking care of those challenges. But as the spike of influx of data centers coming in suddenly in 2021, it presented a major challenge in terms of power requirements, right? So I think some of you may already know that Cyberjaya, the heart of the digitization in Malaysia, is very close to reaching its maximum capacity of power supply. So we are actually looking at constructing a new main intake unit for Cyberjaya just to cope with these large-scale data centers coming in. So responding to power requirements in local areas is a major challenge right now. Because data centers tend to cluster together, so everyone wants to be in Cyberjaya in Klang Valley. It's when they can't get something in Cyberjaya, then they start looking elsewhere. Similarly, in Johor, the 3 or 4 data center investment zones like Step, as well as YTL's site, as well as Nusajaya Tech Park. The ones that have been around a while, basically they are also facing power capacity issues. It's a local issue. So we are hoping that YTL will take up the slack and provide lots more power where you are and give Johor room to grow. So those are the 2 biggest challenges actually.
Wait, can I just add that we have no power capacity issues, so.
Yeah.
Well, I was initially going to hand over to Adila, but actually there's a question that will sort of follow on with this, given that Ziming's already mentioned YTL. So I'll hop over to Han just quickly and ask, energy is the largest cost component of a data center operation, and the recent announcements of hyperscale data centers investment indicate that Malaysia will continue to attract more hyperscale facilities. In your opinion, what does Malaysia need to do right in order to take the lead in terms of energy sustainability?
Well, I think the country is doing quite a lot to encourage the development of renewable energy sources. So I think that's great. The elephant in the room is the fact that actually the government, the energy sector is a monopoly. In fact, we have a big GLC called TNB who is the distributor, generator in many cases, and also owns the transmission line, right? And this is not a true liberalization. And this, unfortunately, this doesn't create much competition. So one of the things that we look at as someone who wants to provide a full stack service is the fact that we need to be able to provide on-demand renewable energy direct to our customers, and we need to be able to show that it has been generated through renewable energy sources. So in Malaysia right now, I think plans have been announced, and I think it could be done a bit faster if we could kind of get be able to buy energy directly for industries directly from renewable energy sources. I think that will be a huge game changer. It's something that you can already do in other countries. And if Malaysia can do this, where Singapore cannot because you don't have the renewable energy capacity, then that's going to be a big thing for Malaysia. So a lot of it is policy and the speed of implementing those policies. And when that comes through, I think there will be a huge boost to this entire industry in this country.
Well, thank you very much. And just on a different note, I'm going to turn back to Adila because that was where my next question was. Is from a data privacy, governance and sovereignty continues to be an ongoing concern for any data center and cloud players entering the country. How can Malaysia improve in these areas to appeal more to DC and cloud players to come in?
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Justin. So I think the discussion is moving really from issues like sovereignty and localization to having the right protections, security, and control over your data. So Malaysia has a good baseline. We've got a data protection law, and we've articulated that aspiration to be a regional lead, as I mentioned. And recently, we've ratified the CPTPP, which is great. That sort of shows our commitment to openness in terms of, for example, facilitating e-commerce through enabling cross-border data flows. I think there's a huge opportunity here for Malaysia to really give that extra confidence to players in the digital economy, that Malaysia is a region that has world-class data protection laws and all the attendant sort of rules and implementation mechanisms to raise it to that level where it can be best in class in terms of a place where you can digitally transact, knowing that your data is safe, secure, and there are adequate protections. So the amendments to the data protection laws, for example, those are much welcome. They introduce things like having mandatory breach notification, so that's on par with international standards, having obligations for data processors. This is what I understand. I think one area where we could really improve in terms of that transparency and confidence to people who want to transact here is in terms of having commitments to law enforcement access to the data center, recognizing that the data center is actually storing customers' data, customers who have customers. It's businesses' data, it's data of companies. So that really should be under the control of that business. And so access to a data center really should be seen through that lens, on par with how what's considered best practice. In fact, the OECD recognizes this, that sort of commitment by governments to respect and protect data that's in their environment is actually very critical to enabling growth of digital economy. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I'll just move on to John, because I have a question, which is, within the scope of rise of investment in data centers in Malaysia, how can edge data centers support and grow the industry?
Thank you, Justin. I'd like to start by echoing what Han said around monopolies and power. I worked for a monopoly in Dubai, and it was counterintuitive to the growth of the country there, because without, ESG is a very key driver for data centers, and especially, with green loans being commissioned now. AirTrunk successfully raised 1.2 billion through ASG-based loans. That without that availability to green power, a facility, I think we're going to retard the industry rather than advance it. And we ourselves, although we purchase coal power in Malaysia, we have to use carbon offsets from our solar in Australia to ESG our power here. So yeah, I do echo, and I do wish you the best of luck in that endeavor. For Malaysia, I mean, look, we're the opposite of a hyperscale. We're micro. Our sites aren't 100 megawatts or 500 megawatts. We're talking about 150 kilowatts of IT load. But obviously, our goal is to have around 20 to 30 edge locations throughout Malaysia, and obviously East Malaysia as well, to empower the 1 to 2 millisecond low latency workload required. But inevitably, they still feed back to a hyperscale. They still, as we have worked, will require the assistance of MDEC. So for us, the opportunity in Malaysia is big, and I agree that the opportunity outside of Singapore for Malaysian facilities is ripe for Malaysia to become that next key hub in ASEAN.
Thank you very much. And I'll move back to Zooming. Given the influx of investment from global companies into the Malaysian data center, what should local data center companies focus on to remain competitive? What should the industry do to ensure a retention and a growth in local talent?
All right, since MDEC is not a data center operator, so I'm not sure whether I'm the right person to answer that question, but I'll try to give it a shot. I think if you look at some of the players in Malaysia, they are basically changing their business model to basically become the service providers for the hyperscalers. So when the hyperscalers come in, usually they will set up in an edge node and set up in a colo facility rather than build something from day one. So this has actually spurred the domestic data center market. A lot of players are actually becoming the hosts for this, the influx of new players. But knowing some of them are going to expand their footprints into their own constructed facilities, I'm guessing that the local players will actually start finding this challenging. But what we have heard so far is typically the hyperscalers, when they move into a facility, they typically don't shut it down. They leave it running because their capacity growth is higher than the ability to build it out. So that's what we are hearing in the market right now. So I think if any of you here are from the local industry, I think when you hear your customers building their own facility, it doesn't mean they're going to leave your facility. They're probably going to continue. So I think what would be best for the local players to figure out is how do you continue to become useful to an incoming investor, right? Because your experience in the local market, your knowledge of the local ecosystem is vital to helping these companies set up in the country. And you'll find a niche in there somewhere. I think it could be that you are not competing with them in terms of selling floor space, but maybe pivot your business to providing technical services to these guys. Right? That's my opinion.
Well, thank you. And the time has slightly changed on the screen, so I'll just ask to...
We lost 6 minutes. Who took the 6 minutes?
So actually, I think we can... I'm just looking at my questions now, seeing which ones are going to fit in the time. I should probably pose a question to all of you, and then we should be able to wrap up from there in that sense, which is, as a goal to become a regional leader within the data center industry, it's all very good saying that as Malaysia, but what targets should be set as indicators of progress in terms of where Malaysia can innovate and to capitalize on its current position? Sort of milestones as to what we should be looking at if we're going to take that role. I'll work down in order. Han, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay.
Okay. I'm not sure whether it's right to kind of look at milestones, but when we looked at this space, we saw a lot of kind of blue ocean in the fact that there's so much demand in Singapore. And it just could not be fulfilled within Singapore. We saw that there was a moratorium. These hyperscalers have been our power customers for a long time. They've been asking for power. They've been asking for capacity. We bought Dodit, which is a data center in Singapore, and that kind of reinforced our view. So 3 years ago, we decided to invest heavily in Malaysia, and we wanted to do something that was at scale, that was ambitious, that would change how people looked at Malaysia as a data center hub. And that's why we acquired 2,000 acres of land, and we wanted to build our own solar farm to power 100%, 500 megawatts of renewable energy, and it had to be near Singapore. And why we could do that was because we're an infrastructure provider, so we are an IPP, so we sell energy as a core business. We have a telecommunications arm, YTL Communications, which is the 4th largest telco in Malaysia. So we can do our own fiber. We have our own data centers already. They're already operating. We have a construction arm, which is the 2nd largest in Malaysia. We can build our own data centers. And so we can provide an end-to-end solution for the hyperscale customers. And that's what I feel they were looking for. So we hope that this is something that would really bring Malaysia onto the map. I think it's generated quite a lot of excitement. Johor is now becoming a base. But then the question is, from a milestone perspective, what next? So we see Malaysia within the ASEAN region is very strategically located. Just like in Singapore, we're right in the heart of everything. And how can we then better facilitate this? We need better connectivity. We won't need to make KL as a bigger hub. I think the government has done a great job in announcing, the shift of government into cloud services. that will drive more adoption. I think Microsoft is one of the cloud service providers there. And the other thing that is going to be a game changer for Malaysia is the fact that with Digital National, we have a Malaysian, we will now have the fastest rollout of 5G in Malaysia because we have one network which is being pushed out. The cost will be shared by 6 consumers, so the average cost of data in Malaysia should be the lowest in the region. And this actually is going to be a virtuous cycle where you have low costs, it becomes more attractive for investors, there'll be more innovation and more investment in 5G. And then the need for data centers should also increase. So I'm very bullish on Malaysia as a data center hub, and I think that we're just at the beginning. So yeah, I think that in the long run is going to be where Malaysia should keep focusing on.
Thank you. And Adila, from a governance standpoint?
So I'm going to go back to the regulatory and policy framework that makes Malaysia attractive, right? So I actually think we're starting from a relatively high base. We don't have any mandated, hard-coded localization laws in general. Having said that, it would be great if we could move from where we are right now, which is that generally permissive, and perhaps in some situations you do need to jump through a few hoops, to make it where it's actually the benefits of adopting cloud and using data center capacity basically are so well known that becomes the default position. Everybody should want to go to cloud, and it's only in very specific, restricted circumstances where maybe that should be questioned, and then maybe in that tiny little sliver of situation. So the default position becomes, well, it's cloud first really, default position becomes that data center capacity, cloud usage is the preferred option. So I think that's something. How we measure that in terms of milestones, I think the national blueprints already set out quite a few milestones. As you mentioned, there's 80% government cloud consumption. But what does that mean? What sort of consumption does that mean? How are you using the cloud? So hopefully, as we move towards that target of 2030, we can get a little bit more clearer on that. And yeah, happy to work private and public sector collaboration on these issues. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And John, from your perspective, obviously building across the region, how do you see Malaysia comparing and standing up and sort of moving forwards from that point?
I think, well, starting with milestones, our own internal KPI is to try and enable 100% local employment. So other than myself being a traveller, everybody else per country, so Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, they're all 100% Malay, 100% Thai, 100% Vietnam. So for us, it was very important that we empowered a country as well as assisting a country. So from a manpower point of view, but also digitally. How working in Malaysia has obviously been, we've had, I'll call it, less challenges here than starting in other countries. It's been a very clean, we've obviously had fantastic support from MDEC, and obviously, you know, we get invited to speak at events. But for us now, growing in this region, as I mentioned earlier, having our hub here, making Malaysia my home, I mean, I live here now, has been integral into our expansion throughout Asia by being based here. And, you know, as the lady from Air Asia, if she's still here, thank you for flying me.
And finally, zooming, do you have any sort of goals or outlines that you have in your mind that you think would indicate progress?
Yes, actually we do. We have a list of issues that we need to fix. We are well aware what they are. We have been working on some of them for a few years, and they are making progress. So, you know, my milestones, which I can't reveal over here in a public forum, obviously, but we are progressing towards those targets. But I think in closing, I think I'd like to say one just a story. In the 70s, right? There were two major car rental companies in the world, Avis and Hertz. And Hertz was number one. And Avis was at a point of losing a lot of money. They were having challenges being number two. So they came up with an advertising campaign with the tagline, "We try harder." And Malaysia, we know we are not number one in this region, so we are trying harder. All right, so I think that's all I want to say for now. Right. Thank you.
I think that's a lovely note to wrap up on. Do we
have a
any
couple of
questions?
questions actually for you, Justin, for you to ask our panelists. Would you like me to help you read them out? It's a bit difficult to see, I know.
I've just realised the angle's not great, but
Yes.
I think I can give it a go. I can see the bottom one the most clearly. To any of the panelists who want to jump in,
We'll bring over an iPad for you, Justin.
will there be an oversupply of data centres in 5 years' time? Do you think we're going to overinvest and overbuild because of this projected growth?
Yeah, I'll take that one. The answer is in 5 years, definitely not. We are just starting out. The guys who basically made announcements in 2021 haven't even started operating yet. So it's a little bit early to say we'll be in an oversupply situation. And by speaking to these investors, the guys who are actually spending money constructing in Malaysia, they are looking at a 20, 30-year deployment plan. And it doesn't look like they are stopping. So I don't think there's going to be a so-called oversupply. Data is growing every year. No, most people here don't delete photos from your phone, right? Once you take a photo, it's in there forever. It's going to live in the cloud. It's just going to grow, all right? So I don't think we'll ever reach to a point where say, that's too much, unless we run out of energy. Yes, all right? So that needs to grow in step. So I think Han has got the potential new business to grow as well, together with the data center industry.
And that's all we've got time for, I think, because the clock says 00. So thank you very much for joining us. And I'd like to once again thank my panelists, Han, Adila, John, and Ziming. Please give them a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Justin, and of course our panelists for sharing your views. Ladies and gentlemen, another big round of applause for Justin, Han Yo, Adila Junit, Jonathan Eves, and Tan Ziming. Now, I appreciate you sending in your questions. Not to worry, I think our panelists will still be hanging around a little bit for a short while. So if you have any questions for them, please do approach and see whether they're willing to answer, okay? I can't guarantee they'll answer, but try, okay? So thank you so much to our panelists. We welcome any feedback on this session, ladies and gentlemen. So please do scan the QR code that we're going to pop up on the screen and help us improve our digital week by sharing any thoughts you have via a quick survey. All right? All right, you may return to your seats, ladies and gentlemen. In the meantime, please allow me to quickly summarize that session that we had just now before we dive into our final topic for Breakout Room 2. Now, why Malaysia? Well, for YTL Power, Singapore is constrained in areas that Malaysia has in abundance, such as resources, land, infrastructure, and renewable energy. So Malaysia has a great talent pool, which for Microsoft is a great driver, and other global players like edge centers. Challenges for Malaysia include power supply capacity in areas like Cyberjaya, where capacity is currently being upgraded, and of course, energy costs. Now, energy is the largest cost component for data centers, so liberalizing the energy sector and focusing on renewable energy will help make energy rates more competitive and sustainable. What Malaysia can do better? Well, Malaysia needs to boost confidence to global players on data protection laws, data protection enforcement, and cybersecurity, which is actually, ironically, our next topic. To remain competitive, local players need to find a niche and consider pivoting to providing technical services rather than simply providing floor space. Finally, what will be the game changer for Malaysia as a data center hub? Malaysia is strategically located, so the government must consider how we can better facilitate connectivity coupled with the fastest rollout of 5G, with the average cost of data being the lowest in the region. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, a quick wrap-up of panel 12, capitalizing on the shifting regional landscape of data centers to become a regional leader. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without taking up any more of your time so that we can all head for lunch in a short while, we'll close up with panel session 14, our final session in Breakout Room 2. We cannot talk digital economy without also looking closely into cybersecurity. As digitalization increasingly takes center stage for economies across the world, so too has the demand for safe and secure cyberspace. In this session, we'll dive into how prepared our National Cybersecurity Strategy, or MCSS, is to take on the challenges of a digital Malaysia, as well as the landscape for cybersecurity moving forward. Now, if you have any questions,